to another episode of FooBar. In this week, as you can see, I'm on holidays, so you will not have a video this week. But I will put a podcast for you after this intro, so at least you will have something to watch today. So enjoy your holidays and see you next week. Bye bye!
All right, welcome to the ServerlessTalk Podcast, tracing the stories that are driving the rise of serverless. I'm your host, Erica Windish, and today I want to introduce Marcia, and I'm sorry, I want to get this last name right. Villalba, is that right?
Yes, that's a way, but the way I will pronounce it is Vishalva, and that's challenging, okay. but it's okay, the way you say it as well.
No, Vishalba?
Yes,
is that right?
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay. So we're coming back after a break, and I actually was never hosted this podcast, so this will be a little bit of a learning curve for me. But let's see. I really want to thank Ben Kehoe of iRobot and Kassandra Perch, currently of Cloudflare, for doing such a great job previously. And I'm really, excited for this new season. So Marcia is AWS Serverless Hero and runs her own consultancy at Unicorn Codes. Is it Unicorn Codes and Servers? Is that right? Oh, no. There's a typo here. You serve on the organizing committee for Serverless Days Helsinki.
Yeah. And I also still working at Rovio as a full stack developer. So.
Oh, you do? Okay,
yes.
Great. I wanted to ask about that because I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, there was a typo in here. It said that you servers on the
no servers.
No servers. This is serverless. Awesome. So, let me jump into some questions here.
Sure.
So, I'd love to just hear your story about how you got started with serverless. Like, what was the first project you built, or what drove you to doing serverless for the first time?
Sure. So first, about my personality, I'm always extremely curious. So that was my first reaction to my first problem that I found serverless interesting. So it was 2015. So basically, Lambda was launched in 2014. So it was quite early on. And we got a call from AWS when we were at Rovio to introduce us API Gateway. Because we are partners and they're always trying to tell us about our new services, we were like, what is this service for? And then I understood that if you combine it with Lambda, everything is kind of very powerful. So we were in the middle of a project by that time. It was like a Netflix for cartoons. And we were having like very big issues. Mostly we were getting a threat from management that will close the project if we don't manage to get our operational costs. Because when you are serving videos online, it's very expensive. And then we were very afraid. We didn't want to lose this project. So then we started looking at all the different alternatives that we could make our service a way cheaper, because we were ad-based service. So we were not charging our users to watch the videos, but we were serving a lot of users. We had by that time around 6 billion views in our service. So it was very big. So we started thinking about, and then we end up thinking of refactoring the whole application basically backwards. So using a lot of CloudFront, and like as our content was very static, we could like take advantage of the cloud. And then we realized that the process in the back from getting from the videos that were uploaded by the administrators until it gets to the client can be all created with a pipeline of all these managed services. And then we start seeing like, oh, there is this new thing called Lambda, and we can plug it in here and there, and we can use API Gateway. And then we start getting all like really crazy. And I went to my boss, like, I want to use this to refactor the whole project into serverless. And he was like, well, go for it. And that's how we started. So it was quite an adventure.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about API Gateway, like, have you have you seen this pattern? Because there's been some discussion about it. It's something I've done a little bit. Richard Boyd over at iRobot has talked about it quite extensively. The idea of using API Gateway to build applications without Lambda.
Yes.
Like, have you done any of that or given that any thought?
Yeah, I have given a lot of thoughts because I've been speaking a lot of conferences this year, and one of the things I try to demystify is the idea of having Lambda as a part of serverless. So I give a lot of examples of how you can have serverless applications just, for example, with API Gateway and Dynamo, and you can create a full working application where you can modify your database, insert records, delete records, and do all kind of things. And people usually look at you and like, what? But that comes from the idea, for me, from AppSync, because when you start looking at AppSync, that is the managed GraphQL service from AWS, then you don't need Lambda at all to do a lot of things. So that brought me to the idea, can I do the same with API Gateway? And yes, you can.
Yeah, and AppSync is interesting, right? Because I haven't used AppSync personally. I mean, I've had members of my team use it, but I haven't personally developed with it. But my experience, my understanding of it is that it's basically like API Gateway, but focused specifically for GraphQL services.
Yeah, well, API Gateway is like REST. You can build REST endpoints, and I think AppSync is more for building GraphQL endpoints. So you can do a lot of things very easily. I've been developing a couple of projects for my serverless consultancy using GraphQL and AppSync, and I really like it. It's super fast to develop, and a lot of things come out of the box with AWS, and you can get this two-way communication. So you can have subscriptions, and your clients can get updates when the data is modified, for example, in a Dynamo table. Nowadays, you can do that with Lambda and API Gateway because, well, there is WebSockets, but you don't need to implement any of that logic when you're using AppSync. It comes out of the box. So that's something I like.
Interesting, yeah, because I've actually been working on a GraphQL project recently, and with Lambda and using API Gateway, and now I'm like, maybe I made a mistake because Amazon has so many services. It's so easy, to forget that like there's another way of doing it. That there's like another service that does the thing.
Yeah.
And when you work with API Gateway all the time, you forget like, oh yeah, that's right, AppSync is also there.
Yeah, but I think it depends on what you want to do. As everything, the more managed you go, the more control you lose. So when you're using AppSync, you are kind of tied to, for example, the velocity templates. That is the velocity language templates, I think they're called. That is the way to connect your GraphQL to your data sources. So when you're using Lambda as your kind of connection, then you can use any language that you want, for example. So that's something I have noticed. People are starting using AppSync, and then they call Lambda because it's very easy to call from AppSync Lambda. And then from Lambda, they do calls to Dynamo because they are not familiar with this velocity language and they are afraid of using it. So they add a layer of overhead there that is kind of not needed because AppSync connects directly to Dynamo. So, but
yeah, and in my particular use case, I was thinking of calling Lambda. Although, again, in the same sense of if I were using AppSync, maybe I wouldn't need that Lambda stuff at all. At least not for all of the calls, right? Like maybe not all of the queries have to go through Lambda.
Exactly. And AppSync has inside this things called pipelines that you can construct like a little workflow. So you can do a little bit fetching data from Dynamo, and then for some particular part of the data you brought, you can apply some Lambda, for example. So you can create some very interesting customization pretty easily.
Yeah. So I want to jump into a different question here.
Sure.
Because I feel this is kind of related. What are some of the new use cases that you've seen in the last year for serverless? Or what are the, more interesting things that you're seeing happening? So like if it's not the, the AppSync, API Gateway thing, at least, is there something else that you think is like kind of like that, which is like something new, like a new use case or a new, just tech, a new trend.
Yeah, well, I don't know there is a lot of things that the communities, I think now is getting a little bit more aware of what is serverless. So there is
Yeah.
different people that are more advanced in their adoption. So I think the WebSocket opened a lot of opportunities for people to explore a little bit more interesting use cases. I think AppSync is something that, as I mentioned, it's has a lot of adoption because it's pretty simple service to use, and I don't know why a lot of people are very interested in starting serverless from there. So I'm happy that that they start from there and not maybe from API Gateway, maybe because it's so connected to Amplify. And I think that is also something that is growing a lot, that the usage of Amplify and how client developers are taking a lot of steps towards using more serverless components, and how because Firebase has been there for a while in Google. So for a lot of client developers, it's easier to move to something like Amplify and start using serverless components from that library. So that's something also I have seen there. But then there is in the backend, people are being very creative with what they can do with serverless. So I have seen all kind of random things. Yeah. But
yeah. I know, like, I've built some outrageous things with Lambda. It's so easy to glue things together. Hopefully other people's services, as well as like your own services, gluing together, just different things like, different databases and so forth.
But I think that's one of the good things and bad things of serverless, because if you don't know what you're doing, you can make an spaghetti architecture pretty easily, and things start connecting to things, and then latency starts piling up, and then you really don't know how to handle this monster, because it's so easy to connect things all together without really understanding how the different services behave and how the different parts of the cloud behave. So I think it has its good side and its bad side. And if people are really not aware of what they're doing, because it's so easy to stitch all these things together, it can become, for example, I have seen a lot of monitoring messes because people don't know what they're doing, and then it's impossible to monitor those applications when they are out.
Yeah. And I mean, I think sprawl is part of the problem too. Like, it's really easy to build new serverless functions. And if you're going from a perspective of like enabling your developers to do self-service, to write their own functions and deploy them, maybe you get in a state where developers are like, let's say, like a database was stood up and a certain amount of capacity was allocated and expected for that database. And that database, like you're not, let's say, running on serverless Aurora, but you're running on like a classic RDS. Suddenly anybody can start writing code against that database, like with low level of effort, right? You don't need to wait for servers to get deployed. You don't need to even build EC2 instances and deploy those and get like cost allocations for those. You just ship a serverless function, and suddenly you're making thousands, millions, billions of SQL queries.
But that's very dangerous if you do it wrong, because if different kind of functions are accessing data, then it's very hard to keep track of that data. You lose this kind of privacy that data before was connected to a service, and that service was the only one giving access to it. So I think there are some things that still needs to stay when we move to serverless. Some architectural design principles needs to stay, and I think, for example, the access to a data service, it needs to belong to someone, and some service needs to give access to the other services through some way, some API or some way that they can call it. But if every service that you manage can talk to that data source somehow, then it can become very, very challenging to manage in the future, because everything is super highly coupled.
Yeah.
So
I think those are largely human problems, right? It's like with the database, like that database access is, controlled through, say a DBA, for instance, giving you credentials like a username and password for your application. assuming that you don't have developers, who just go and say, hey, I know the credentials from this last project I did, and just, reuse them, because that
Yeah.
happens. And
Yeah.
it's a challenge. I think it's a huge challenge. And I don't know.
But I think more now than ever, developers using serverless, because they are so close to the architecture, I think it's very important for developers to really understand some good architectural patterns to design applications. So before you could make mess in the code, but now you can really mess up the whole application architecture very easily if people don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
I'm just looking through my list of questions. So one of the questions was, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges for developers and companies migrating to serverless? It just seems very related to the thread we were just having.
Yeah, well, I think the first problem when migrating to serverless is where to start, because it's very hard to migrate an existing service to serverless from one day to another, and more if it has traffic. So I think that's one of the challenges. And also if you have to educate your people at the same time. So where to start the migration? What are the steps that you're going to take as a company to migrate? I think that's very important to define early on, because if you start, let's migrate everything, then you will not migrate anything and you will have a mess by then.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's really nice to go to conferences and hear all these war stories, because usually there's so many different stories about people migrating to serverless.
Yeah.
And
so I find it interesting because we're just talking a little bit about these challenges that we're having, I think, as maybe more mature organizations that have been using serverless for a while, right? And those are just very different challenges from those that are starting with serverless, right?
Yeah.
Just because we're having these challenges of maybe human problems become difficult when the technology problems go away. But that's a different challenge. That's a challenge we have because we actually have that maturity already around serverless. I think if you're starting out, that's probably different, right?
Yeah, but I think the people problems are always there, because in general, at least for me with serverless, when I started, I remember the biggest challenges were getting myself in an understanding on how asynchronous architecture work, good patterns for developing distributed systems. Sure, learning the technology at the same way, but in general, the technology is connecting APIs together. So it's stitching things. It's quite straightforward. The hardest part, in my opinion, is to create something that can be maintainable over time, that you can do it as infrastructure as code, that you can create good continuous integration on it, and that your developers can quit and the next generation of developers can take over without wanting to kill themselves. So I think that's a challenge that every new technology always have, and I think that's where it comes the good practices, and they're always related to people and culture and company culture in general.
So would you maybe would you maybe agree or not agree that moving to serverless, some of those challenges that you mentioned, like CI/CD and so forth, may have already been there, but serverless is a forcing function to say you have to do these things and do these things right.
Yes.
Whereas before you could have maybe cheated a little bit and maybe not had your CI/CD processes all the way there.
Definitely. I think serverless is at the end of the day, the whole idea of DevOps and Agile. When you do serverless, you need to do those two things right, because it takes you to that path. At least that's my experience in all the serverless projects I have worked, and they're the projects that have been working in production successfully are the ones that I follow the best Agile practices and the best DevOps practices, because then you tend to have a project that is maintainable, because it's very, at least in my experience and projects I have seen, it's very easy to get very messy with all these different services that you can connect together, because you don't own them. You cannot really go into them and do things. So you really need to have a good understanding of your flows and your how the data moves around your application, and how you can make it the most efficient.
Yeah. All right. So let's see here. So if you're interested, you want to talk a little bit about Serverless Days Helsinki?
Sure, we can talk about that.
So, what have you learned from running that? And maybe what would you do differently? And what do you think, or what do you think is going to be different this year?
Well, we had Serverless Helsinki some weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
It was end of April. Yeah, I'm very bad with dates. For me, all the days are merging together. But it was some weeks ago, and it was really good. We had 200 participants, and we have around 11 different talks. So it was everybody was very happy after it, and the organizers, we were very happy, and the sponsors, everybody was happy. But at the end of the day, there were a lot of things that I learned from this. The first one, I think at least the action point I took for next year, is the diversity, because we started planning this event very late. So we started very early, but we were procrastinating for very long. So actually we got the place confirmed and the date 2 months before the event started. So basically then we opened the call for papers, and then I started approaching a lot of local females around the area to please come and speak, because we want to have diverse speakers, and all of them were booked, and I was feeling I started too late. And our speakers were male, and we had a panel with one female, and I was really happy for that. But I still have that as an action point, that we need more diversity in our panels and in our conferences, because there's many amazing ladies. They are doing amazing things. So I think we need to show that. So that's an action point for me. Next year, I will start 6 months earlier hunting more diverse speakers, because I want to show the amazing things of the community. Then one thing, the conference was, we had really low budget, because we didn't know how. None of us have run conference before, so we were a little bit afraid of how much money we'll spend. And at the end of the day, we spent quite little, and that was good. But then, in the other hand, we had really little nice details in the conference, and people were saying, "Oh, there was no swag, and there was not this, and there was not that." So that's something we took for next year. Now we know more or less how much it costs, so we can get a little bit more interesting things for our attendees, and make them a nicer experience. But in general, it was really fun experience to run this conference. We had great speakers, and we tried to have 50% local speakers at least, and that was good. We had at the end 70 call for papers from when we choose 11, so it was good. I was very happy with the event.
Great. And it was now the attendees of that are mostly local, right?
Yes. Usually Serverless Days is very cheap, a ticket, and usually people are coming from the local communities. That's really great. I run the AWS user group here, so it was nice to see a lot of people from there, but also we were seeing people from the Azure community and from the Google Cloud community, and students and newbies and all kind of people. So that's something that make us very happy.
Wonderful. So let's see here. I'm going through this list. So, well, since we're talking about Helsinki, you didn't always live there, right? Is there
No.
a story behind that you're willing to share?
Sure. I came to Helsinki 10 years ago, so I'm originally from Uruguay, and I was doing my engineering degree there, and I wanted to exchange. So everybody from my class was either going to Spain or to US, and I wanted to do something different. And I was very interested in mobile phones. 10 years, well, it was more. It was 12 years when I started my research. Mobile phones were not that everywhere and not that flashy as we have them. But Nokia was very big. So I was like, okay, where is Nokia? Is it in Japan or something? And then I started Googling, it's a Finnish company. And then I started searching around, and there was this university in Finland that had quite a good connection with Nokia, and it sent most of their students to do internships in Nokia. So I applied to come here to Alto, and I was selected, and I came for first, it was 1 year to do an exchange program, but then they invited me to stay to do my master degree, and I did my master degree and my thesis with Nokia, so it was amazing. And the month I finished my thesis is when Nokia fired half of the employees, so that was not amazing.
That's amazing. But I mean, at that time, right? Like, I mean, Nokia was huge, right? I mean, before the iPhone,
Yes.
and even early iPhone.
Yes.
I mean, Nokia was, some of our younger listeners might not remember this, right? But Nokia was huge in cell phones.
I'm happy to say that I work in the 3 biggest IT companies in Finland: Nokia, Supercell, that is the one that make Clash of Clans and Clash Royale, and I work for Rovio, the creators of Angry Birds, 3 Finnish companies that they are really great. So I'm a happy foreigner. I've checked the 3 of them of my list.
And I hear they're making a new Angry Birds movie.
Yes, in August it's coming out.
Yeah. How has it been at Rovio? Because I mean, that's you're at Rovio.
Yeah. Rovio is a great company to work. It's one of my favorite things is the people there is extremely diverse. So either if it's a Finnish company, but when you're there, it's from all the world. So you feel super comfortable working there as a foreigner, and as a lady, they have I never worked with so many women architects. They managed to recruit them all. So as a foreigner and as a woman, it's like really great place to work. And from the technology side, if you are interested in cloud, it's a great place as well, because they are cloud native since forever. So they never had anything on premise. They have lots of traffic, and you can try whatever you want, and really good connections with AWS. So you can get all the information you want from the source. So it's a great place to work.
Yeah.
So.
And
we do games.
and movies, at least through whatever licensing deals that.
The movies they use the brand, but we don't make them.
Yeah, you don't make them, but they use the brand, and children love that brand. I have young kids,
yes.
And like everybody knows Angry Birds, so
So it's good to work there. You make a lot of people happy.
That's great. It's wonderful having a job that makes other people happy. Like I hope that IOPipe makes people happy, but I don't know if it makes people as happy as Angry Birds.
Well, I think it's a different target.
It is. It's a very different target audience. So, since we're talking a little bit about, Helsinki and, serverless days, what kind of adoption do you see, like in, regionally, like, because obviously, like your own company, has quite a bit of adoption, but what about like some of these other companies? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I've been running now the AWS user group for a year and a half or something, and there I can get some perspective of what people that are already in the cloud see of serverless. And it's quite interesting, because the first thing I did when I joined the group was to ask to my meetup fellows what topics they were interested in, and I think 90% of them mentioned serverless. So I think there was either very little adoption, but they were very interested, or they were already using it in production. And in our meetups every month, we have regular meetups every month, there's always some topic related to managed services and serverless. So I think in Helsinki there is quite a lot of adoption of maybe not fully serverless like applications, because I like this concept of the serverless spectrum. I think it was Ben Kehoe that coined that term, but I really like it, because you don't need to be 100% serverless. You can still have some services that are in EC2s or more managed services, or less managed services, and you combine it with other more managed things. And there is a lot of companies in the middle of the spectrum and starting new projects more with serverless components. So I'm seeing a lot of that. I think the Nordics in general are quite progressive countries, and in general, people in the companies in here, when they're hired, they are given quite a lot of freedom. So that makes innovation quite easy because the organizations are pretty flat and people can try new things without having to ask so much permissions. So that's why I think the adoption is quite high.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's something that I really, I probably should be more aware of, because I mean, I've done quite a bit of international work, mostly in Asia though, not so much in Europe. But like every country or even every region has different ways, and culture has different ways of work that really affect what the outcome is, right? The adoption of cloud in Asia is just very different than it is in the Americas or in Europe.
I was in South America because I'm from there last year doing some talks, and it was pretty interesting because a lot of people were jumping from on-prem to serverless. They skipped the whole EC2s and virtual machines. They just went directly to serverless. And that's something I think in the Nordics, they've been on cloud for so long that they are not starting from on-prem to serverless. They usually start from virtual machines and EC2s to serverless. Like they go through all the steps. But in South America, there were quite a lot of stories of people like moving on-prem to serverless. Like adopt the cloud with the latest technologies.
I mean, and it's interesting because, like, honestly, I think there's still so many companies that haven't moved to the cloud at all, and and the organizations that don't do development, who still haven't even moved to EC2. So, like, your local law firms and your local accountancies, they either are just now trying to find SaaS providers, or they're looking at taking those traditional apps and moving them into EC2 instances with, like some sort of, VPNs, back and forth to the cloud to run their services.
Yeah, it is. There is a lot of companies, and I think, for example, in Helsinki, one of the scary things for a lot of companies is that there is no region. Now they open the Stockholm region, but there is no Helsinki region. So a lot of companies that are more old school, they're like, well, if we go to the cloud, then our data will be somewhere and we are scared. So these kind of things also put people a little bit like, oh, should we move or should not we move? But now Google opened their Helsinki region. So I think that will help some companies to move there as well, because they have the fear of losing control of their information. And I imagine a lot of companies might have some legal requirements that they cannot move their data somewhere else.
Yeah, there can definitely be legal requirements according to, what those legal requirements are and who you are.
Exactly.
Like if you're a government, for instance, like even the U.S. government can put some things outside of the GovCloud region depending on what the project is, but it still will generally probably have to be in the U.S. unless there's like a valid reason for it not to be.
Exactly.
And like there often are good reasons for it not to be, right? Your CDN for like content,
Yeah, if you have customers all around the world, you want to have support all around the world.
In theory, although the government doesn't always do the best things either.
No.
They sometimes do the thing they're told to do.
Yeah, sometimes you cannot do it any other way because you have a regulation that says no, the data is staying here.
Yeah,
and it's valid. And I think that's something I think the cloud providers are understanding, and that's why they are opening so many regions everywhere, because they know if they want to get the most of the market, they need to have at least local storage in that place.
Absolutely. And we're seeing now that like Lambda is rolling out to like every new region that gets deployed.
Yeah.
I think every region that gets deployed now has Lambda like from day one.
Yes, that's good because that will increase the adoption of it. But I wonder how much, like, people, for example, in South America, are they using the Sao Paulo region? It's the only region in South America. But I still think a lot of people in South America are using the US region, because unless you're in Brazil, I think it might be a kind of longer, the connection to Brazil, because of how the wires are set up, than to the States. I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, because sometimes the infrastructure, like physical infrastructure, I really don't know how it's set
Well,
up. For example, in South America, like, all the countries are that well connected to Brazil that it makes sense to use Brazil as a region, or it's better to use just United States.
yeah, I don't want to speculate on things I don't know the
I
answers
don't know.
to.
Yeah, but
Um,
I don't think, at least in Uruguay, where I'm from, people are really using the regional region. I think they're all using
yeah.
US if they're in the cloud, because
I mean,
nobody will open an Uruguay region. We are too small.
yeah, it was just funny though because like at IO Pipe we do have things deployed into San Paulo, so like
Yeah.
we have things in that region. So like Lambda layers was like I think it was like first available in that region, like when it was
Okay.
when it was in preview. Um,
Oh.
like when it was in preview, I think it was like the first region that it was available in. So I spent a lot of time in that region actually, even as an
Okay.
American, which is kind of funny. But like also not all the regions are priced the same either, and that can also be a
No.
consideration, right? Because
Exactly.
like even if it's your local region, if you're paying more for it, like and if you don't have a regulation or a strict requirement to have it local,
Yeah.
it might make sense to put the data in another region and use a CDN.
Exactly. And also it depends where your customers are, because a lot of companies are, I don't know, in Finland, but the customers are in the US. So why to put your things in Finland if your customers are there? Just put it closer to them. So there is many reasons why you will put things in one place or another.
Yeah,
But
I mean, again, like IO Pipe, we deploy to every region, right? Because that's where our customers are. They're in every region.
exactly.
Um, so let's see here. We are getting a little deep into this. So let's see. What would if you could have one feature from AWS that you don't already know about through other means? Like, if you could have one feature from AWS, what would it be?
Oh man, I think I hate VPCs, so not needing them anymore. Every time you have to open a VPC connection from Lambda, I just want to cry. So that's something I hate. But my two requested things I wanted for a really long time was like serverless Aurora and the WebSockets. And I was happy with WebSockets, are very useful. What serverless Aurora, at least the API connection is not there yet. It's very slow. So that's something I would like to get. Better SQL serverless database. That would be great. That I can have there a proper that I don't need to open a VPC to have my queries, and everything works fast and nice, like Dynamo does, for example. I love Dynamo, but it doesn't work for all the use cases, and some customers really want to have things in SQL. So I think that Aurora serverless is not there yet for the API calls. So that's one of the things I really miss. But yeah, I don't know. That's one of my biggest problems always. And also, sorry for IO pipes, but I would like to have a full proper monitoring tool inside my
I mean,
AWS account.
I get it. Like, it's it needs to be easy and it needs to be like immediate and
And cohesive and makes sense to
everybody
get
should have
there.
access to good monitoring and observability. We're
Yeah.
trying to make that possible, but we're also not part of AWS, so like
I know, and I think you have found a really good business there, because that part is really hard to do from the AWS console, and I don't think if you have a very complex application, you have all the information there, but it's very hard to visualize and to find. So I think that's where the third-party monitoring tools are really doing a lot of great work. They have nice UIs and they make it easy to find and to visualize and to see where the errors are. And that's something I would like to see from AWS. I would not like to leave you out of business to all of you, because I know many people that run these kind of companies and they're great.
I agree.
I use AWS so much.
I agree with all this. Like, I want the AWS experience to be better. I also, don't want to go out of business. So, I hear you. So what's next for you personally? Are you speaking at any events or have projects coming up?
Yeah, I'm speaking tomorrow in the AWS Stockholm Summit. So that's my next event. And then in June, I have a couple of conferences, one in Finland, and then I'm going to Serverless Days Milano. So I'm pretty excited for that. And then after June, I will take a break of 1 month just to chill, because I've been speaking in 2 or 3 events every month for the last 5 months. So I want to be quiet.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm currently coming out of a break.
Good.
I recommend it.
I think it's good now and then. The problem is that I love speaking at events. It's like my kind of addiction. I feel so good after getting down from the stage that every time somebody invites me to an event, it's like, I want to go. I cannot say no. And then I end up in these kind of non-stop preparations to go to somewhere. And it's great, but it stars you up. So I think 1 month of holidays with no planes, just stay quiet and enjoy life and my children and my husband and my mom is coming. So just relax.
Wonderful. Yeah. Relax. Yeah. Have time for yourself.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Okay, we're running up to the end here. So we want to try this last thing, which we've called the Fast React segment. And
okay.
I think it's supposed to be in one word. Answer the following question. We don't have to be strict about this. So you need more than one word. But let's try and make them like just a couple words. So your favorite language?
Spanish.
Favorite programming language?
I don't know. I like JavaScript a lot. But I'm not buy into any language. So every language has its best use when it's used right.
I agree. And I don't think this has to be an exhaustive. Like, just because it's your favorite doesn't mean that you dislike the others.
Yeah, I like JavaScript. If I have to start typing something, I start in JavaScript.
What's your daily driver? Mac, Windows, Linux?
Mac.
Role model?
My parents.
That's one.
They're very basic, but I think I learned a lot of resilience for them and surviving. And I think those are important tools in the in the modern world. Frustration tolerance and all that kind of things.
That's wonderful to be able to have your parents as role models. A gadget you can't live without?
My phone. I'm attached to that device.
Your first computer. This can be more than
that was a 386. So I was 6 years old and my dad bought it so I could play with it. So 386.
Yeah. Do you play games? Do you have a favorite game?
Yes. My husband is a game collector, so we have around 16, 17 different consoles and around 2,000 different games.
Oh my God.
So we do play games, but the game that I play the most is The Sims, because that's for me, like, takes me to a very relaxing place. I can play with dolls a couple of hours a day and I feel really relaxed. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. I also know it's honest because you didn't say Angry Birds.
No, I play Angry Birds because I like puzzle games, but those are my kind of bus or commuting games. But the game that I will sit and play is The Sims.
That's wonderful.
I like.
All right. Favorite thing to do away from a computer?
I like cooking. And that's a problem. It makes you fat. I should like running.
Most important technology of 2019.
Serverless.
And let's see. What's the best advice you've ever received?
stand up and continue walking and don't give a fuck of what other people think about you. Resilience. Getting up.
Awesome. Well, that's the end of my questions.
Good.
This was a wonderful chat. I really appreciate having you here.
It was really fun.
And I'm so thankful you're also our first guest. So,
Cool.
All right. Well, before we go, is there anything that you want to plug or talk about?
Well, as everybody can find me on YouTube, I run the FooBar channel, so I think there is the best place to find me, or in Twitter at Mavi888uy. I got my Twitter handle when I was like super young, and there I have the DMs open, and I will post everything that I'm doing. So those two places are where I hang out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.